Something exciting is coming to Westlake Village this summer, and you're hearing it here first. After the incredible response to our Female Founder Series event in March, I'm teaming up with Neighborly to bring you more in-person opportunities to connect, get inspired, and try some delicious Neighborly eats. In just a moment, I'll share how you can be the first to grab a ticket. What if the future of farming isn't about doing more, but about doing better? Welcome to Conejo Valley Visionaries, where we spotlight the changemakers reimagining what's possible in our community and beyond. Today, we're joined by Molly Chester, co-founder of Apricot Lane Farms in Moorpark, and a leading voice in regenerative agriculture. In this episode, Molly shares her path from culinary student to farmer and how restoring soil can restore so much more: our food systems, our health, and our connection to each other. From cookbook writing to compost, from managing people to nurturing ecosystems, this conversation digs deep into the heart of what it takes to build a farm, and more importantly, a movement. Once you're done listening, make sure to watch your documentary, The Biggest Little Farm. It's a beautiful glimpse into the story behind the soil. Let's dive in. If you enjoy this episode and find value in the podcast, please leave us a 5-star review and rating. This helps more people find the podcast, and therefore each story can reach more folks in the Conejo Valley. Hey, Molly, welcome to Conejo Valley Visionaries. Thank you so much for being with me today.
Hi, Christina. I'm happy to be here.
Fantastic. So I want to start off by saying I recently rewatched The Biggest Little Farm and was so touched by that beginning scene with the clouds of smoke and the fires, and seriously brought me to tears, living in the Conejo Valley where that is our yearly reality. And obviously what just happened in Southern California at the beginning of the year. I'm just curious, that was shot several years ago, but we're still dealing with that. How are you guys dealing with that now? Emotionally, logistically, how do you think about this climate resistant farming? I mean, it really is just so ever present. So I'm curious to start off with that.
Totally. Yes, it is, as you know, just so stressful to have to navigate fires. It's, growing up on the East Coast, hurricanes maybe were more familiar. Tornadoes maybe have that you can't control it, go in the basement kind of feel. But fires are just so you can never predict when it's going to happen. It pops up out of the blue and all of a sudden you're on alert, and it's incredibly stressful. And so that just is what it is. But it's in all of our practice, we're thinking about things like that because the nature of regenerative farming, you really focus on soil development. And when you're developing that soil, you're creating kind of a sponge in the top 10 to 12 inches of soil, which maintains moisture for your entire farming area. And so that does make it so that we're at least a bit fire resistant. It's not as flammable as open land that's sitting there ready to burn.
Yeah.
And then we have things like a fire truck, a water truck, and things like that, so that we can put out spot fires where we are. And we think about the edges of our perimeter. We cut down the mustard around the pastures and things. We do a lot of things to just make the farm less appealing. But this past year, the fire went right up to the property line of, we have 50 acres that's down the road from the main farm, and it went right up to the edge of that property and then stopped. And the firefighters did an amazing job. I mean, it's just you sit in so much gratitude for the kind of container that they hold, because everyone is so vulnerable. So, but everybody, I think, in this region knows somebody who is deeply affected. And our orchard manager, John Shustra, he lost a lot during this year's fires. There's actually a GoFundMe still out there for him, just so putting that out there. You can probably find it on the link on Apricot Lane Farms, because that's been a huge help for him. Because the reality is, farmers, they're just piecing it together. They love the land, and that's why they're doing what they're doing. So when they face destruction like that, it's a lot to rebuild. So yeah, we think about it a lot, as I'm sure you do too.
I know, it's just such a different scale. And when some of the footage from the film, from the documentary, where you see the winds and the animals, and there's just so much that goes into that, when, not just on your daily farming practices, but when you're thinking about these natural disasters that we deal with in this area. One of the things I'm always curious about is how people ended up in the Conejo Valley or the surrounding areas. I know you guys were in Santa Monica when you decided to make this jump into being farmers. Tell me, how did you decide of this very special parcel of land in Moorpark, and why Ventura County, or was that part of your original strategy?
Yeah, I'd love to say that it was like incredibly calculated, but it was not. Essentially, we're East Coasters and we came and lived in Santa Monica. John was working on a project out here. I was a private chef, and there's an industry for that out here. So we enjoyed our time down there. And yet, it was starting to expire. We knew that we wanted to get into a place that was a bit more rural. And at the time, I was cooking in a way that what inspires me about cooking is to try to just see how you can create the maximum nutrition on a plate that you possibly can. And then, consume that in a way that has peace and consciousness. So you're absorbing those nutrients. So building your own gut microbiome to do so. And to do that, it really is about the choices the farmer makes. So it's about finding farmers who are really focused on building the nutrients of that top bit of topsoil. And so we started looking for those farmers, and we found some certainly, and yet there were other holes. We wanted really amazing eggs, and we couldn't find those at the time. And so that led us to follow what had been a dream for us forever, which was to be working land and to have uh, some place where we could grow things. And I had been growing on my like porch garden in Santa Monica. It was very small scale. So as we started dreaming about this, we met our partners, and that enabled us to look on a much bigger scale than we ever would have been able to do by ourselves. And in doing so, we initially were on the coast looking. John was like, had this dream of being able to surf and farm at the same time. So we looked there.
And it's possible.
That is possible, but we really couldn't find anything. And there was a piece of land out here, and I got to give it to my husband because he kept saying, Molly, we got to go there. And I had heard of Moorpark because when we first moved here, we had a friend who was staying up in this region. And so every time I was on the highway, I always saw Moorpark and like it registered. So when he said this, I was like, I don't know, it's so inland. And then also it was a horse farm, and I didn't know if that was fitting everything we were looking for. He's like, Molly, I feel it, let's go. So we went, and as soon as we drove on the property, he looked at me and he said, Molly, we have to make this happen. It's so beautiful up here. We drove down High Street, which is now finally getting developed in an amazing way. And Vince Daly is doing such a nice job with that. I think it's going to build so much community in the area and start to bring the kind of foodie side of what the community can be to life, with Enegrin down there and Hearth coming in, and now that space. And we got to get some like really good conscious restaurants and things there. I think it's just going to truly change the map of what Moorpark. And we kind of saw that when we drove down that street. We were like, this is it. This can be really great, because we had gone to this place in England called River Cottage, where you eat at the farm and then you can go down into the town, and they had a little cantina down there, and it was very like a sweet little kind of agricultural area, which is, Moorpark's like a bigger scale of that, but still just such a great agricultural community. So when we drove in, we saw that and we're like, it could be this. And then we drove up to the farm, and the farm's rolling hills and topography, and the way that it had a pond already, and it needed renovation, but it was there, and it had infrastructure that we might need, and pastures and orchard and all the diversity that we wanted to have as a foundation for the dream of this farm. And it just was a great fit. And so it all ended up happening in like a dream come true kind of way. I felt like the first day that I woke up on the farm, it's like, oh my gosh, it feels like one of those stories where you wake up and learn you're a princess, except I got to wake up and learn I'm a farmer. Like, that was my version of that.
Right, that is. I love it. That is a dream. And I feel like increasingly for more people right now too, that idea that you really are able to like escape the city life and create something pretty incredible. And not very far still from Santa Monica or
Yeah,
the beach.
not
So
very
we
far.
can
And
still
that's the beautiful thing for the project is it has access to, however many million people live in Los Angeles and Santa Barbara and Ventura County in and of itself with Ventura. There's a lot of people here to be able to feed and to be able to, if they're interested, come and learn about what we're doing. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
So you mentioned you grew up on the East Coast. As a kid, what did you think you wanted to be when you grew up?
Oh gosh, I did not have it nailed down. Let's just say that. I had no idea that I would be going in this direction for a long, long time. I grew up in the suburbs, both of Pennsylvania and then down in Atlanta. I was in the suburbs. I went to Georgia Tech, which is like a technical school, and that was not a fit, but I did business there. Love the school, but I'm not an engineer. And then still at that point, I had no idea. All I knew when I got out of Georgia Tech was that I didn't want to do the things that I had just learned about, and that I wanted to go in a different direction where I was more in a trade space where I was able to, I wanted to, rather than kind of like managing the people doing things, I wanted to be the person doing it. And at that point, the only thing I really was interested in was culinary. So I thought, oh, maybe I'll go to culinary school. And John was very supportive. And so I did. I went up to New York City and did that for a while, the place called the Natural Gourmet Institute of Health and Culinary Arts, which was amazing. And I found my like minds. It was the first time where I was sitting there. I was like, oh my gosh, this is what you like that too. And you like that too. And I was the biggest geek you're ever going to find. On the weekends, I would just like plan out I had no money, it's like the beginning of my life. And I would plan out my weekend. So I would walk all the way across New York City to go, and I would just buy an appetizer at some restaurant that I wanted to try because I couldn't afford anything else. And then I would walk the whole way to lunch and like do the same thing where I'd get like a side dish. Anyways, I just loved it.
No, I resonate with that. I lived in New York City right after college, and it was the same way. I wasn't in culinary school, but you really had to figure out how to make that like dream work within some constraints, economic
boundaries. Yes, exactly. Yes. So love that. And I forget, what was the original question?
Just that, what you wanted to be when you grew up. But it sounds like you took this culinary path that sort of led you to then open the farm.
100%. It led me in because when at school, I got this book called Nourishing Traditions. And it's a book that really highlights ancestral ways of cooking. And I'm so fascinated by that because we've become, I'm not anti-modern. I love the technology to understand and support what we're doing in this world. And it can provide so much information that can like hone in what you're doing. And yet the ancestral ways didn't have access to any of that. So they just had trial and error and a very physical way of being. And so there's so much wisdom inside of that they've carried from generations of maintaining health and longevity for their people. And so when you go back in that and honor and respect what that has to offer, it can be such an enhancement to a modern way of life. And so when I found that, I became totally enamored with soaking and sprouting and fermenting and all these things. And farmers, just like they were my rock stars, that, and chefs doing this way, and farmers were just what I loved. And so, yeah, that led eventually to the farm. And then, which led me to a whole nother world of learning just about how it all works. And the only thing I came in with, because I grew up in suburbia, parents we didn't really go camping, it wasn't like our style. But I did understand at that point, because I had dealt with some health issues in my 20s and used this way of eating to be able to restore the gut microbiome. And when you start to understand and learn how the gut works, you understand innately what soil is doing, because it's the gut of the earth. And then you realize that you're really working to balance the microbial population in that soil so that they are feeding your plants, because plants don't have a stomach. They're reliant upon that soil to be able to provide the nutrients to them. And it's much more of an art in that way, just like a sourdough loaf or things like that are. And that's really kind of the crux of what inspires me the most. So then it was just, a decade plus of learning every day from people who knew a whole lot more than me, and having a lot of humility to just bring what I had to offer, but not try to pretend I knew it all. And we just had built such an amazing team here, and just, yeah, with the support of our partners to be able to kind of see these dreams into reality, it was a fun ride.
Yeah, no, I mean, then that's interesting too, because there's the science of cooking, and as you relate it to the sort of science of like how the land works and the ecosystem. I mean, so many of those stories that were told in the documentary and just overall and how what you're doing are so incredible and eye-opening. I am curious though, I believe you started though after culinary school doing like food blogging and that, so did you, which is, entrepreneurial. And then I'm curious, do you consider yourself an entrepreneur?
I would say that that's the way my mind works, and my husband's too, because he's been in the film industry. All of our industries that we've ever been in, between film and food and farming, are like incredibly hard and taxing in the sense of like long hours and a lot of kind of risk. And that's just, I don't really know any other way other than just kind of like building from that entrepreneurial space. So I would say, even though, life has looked different here in a lot of ways than whenever I was truly just like contracting uh, people to cook for, all the time, it's still the spirit of an entrepreneur is what's inside of me.
Yeah, I can see that. And I think some of the lessons when I think about how they apply to whatever business, whether it's that of a farm or starting something new, but this idea of like time, I thought that was a really interesting lesson of, this, what happens after 2 years versus 3 years when you're, using your cover crop, and like how you think about that and do you find that there's a level of patience that you've had to learn, or is that just something that comes with maybe this entrepreneurial mind of really giving time and understanding that things take time and you have to, like, that forward momentum is so important?
Yeah, I would say I start out, I'm very motivated by just like, in a baseline level, kind of need. I'm like, oh, I want to work with great food. Okay, I guess I got a farm. I want to have my kids schooled in a different way. Okay, I guess I got to start a school. It's very, I'm not thinking in advance like that. But then when I'm in the process of trying to figure out whatever I got to figure out, I'm so drawn by doing it in a very kind of like, expansive way that enables like true health to flush into whatever it is that I'm working on. um, then that makes you patient. There's an element of that, because whenever you start um, to try to figure out and evolve all the pieces of the puzzle, it doesn't happen quickly. And that's what I was saying about like the ancestral population working with food. That was generations of time. Like when you're farming, you're putting in a tree because that's the right thing to do. And you're not going to really see that thing be as big as all the oaks that we've put in the farm. Like that'll be generations of time that, get to enjoy that tree. And so that process builds the kind of patience inside of you. And when you start to understand through just being with it, because I didn't understand, all these things were learned things. But when you start working with it and understanding the value, like the value of that oak tree to bring in native pollinators for your land, and you recognize how deeply important that is, there's not really another choice. And then not having another choice makes you patient, because you're like, okay, I guess that's the only way that I can do this.
Yes.
Because I don't know that I'm innately patient. Like my mom is one of those that if there's like a ball of yarn that got all like tangled up, I give it to my mom, because she will sit there. She's like so able to just sit there and patiently unwind it. And I'll make myself nuts, because I don't know that I am that, but I've built that in the things that I care about because of the value that it brings.
That's so interesting. And I wonder too, being able to, Well, I'm curious with the farm. So your original kind of goal with it was to be able to create the food that you wanted to eat, like knowing that you're creating like this rich, nutrient-rich food. Then at what point does like in that first part of it, was it more just like the lifestyle, or where did you imagine you could maybe make money from it? Was it thinking the like telling of the story and helping inspire others? Was it the farm stand part of it? Like where did that come? Because it's so fun to then watch the documentary, which is now part of the overall brand company, and be able to see those stories play out and like
Yeah.
be able to like look back and that 2020 vision of it. So I know that's sort of like a convoluted question, but I'm curious of like how you went from there to there.
Yeah. So I think that I've come to recognize there's like no shame in however you get started. Like I've heard John's done so many cool documentaries, and there was one documentary where he was doing it about musicians, and this guitarist was explaining that he used to like draw guitars all over his books in school because he was just so inspired by how they look. And that's how some inspiration comes. Like you just want to hang out in the art store, and then later you learn you're an artist. I literally like hung out in the natural food store for hours and hours, and I would read everything. And now it kind of makes sense why I was doing that, but I didn't at the beginning. But then wherever that desire comes from and that inspiration, when you pull that thread, all the other things that are important start needing to come to fruition to be able to make it happen, because that progress is going to need a wholeness to it to be in any sustainable way. And what you realize, so for me it was all food. It's like food saves the world. Like I'm always a believer. Like my initial vision was like, I want to live in a world where you can go anywhere in that world and eat real food. I want to go to a movie theater, and I want to get real popcorn that's not like GMO popcorn, and I want like real butter on top of that, and I want all those things. And I want that for everybody, because like I don't want to, if I don't want to eat that, I don't want anybody else to be able to have to eat that if they so choose. But I'm not here to like tell anybody what they need to do either. And I also was really drawn because in my early 20s, well, actually, it was when I was 9 years old, I heard this guy say, if we don't change the way that we're operating, the world as we know it is not going to be here in 50 years, just with like climate change, whether you believe it or not. It's like just with changes of how we're maybe choosing toxic ways with the earth. It's not like we aren't necessarily connecting with what the earth needs as a part of the equation. So when I heard that, I'm 9 years old sitting in a woods with some guy that's telling me this, that I don't know this guy. I'm like on a retreat. And I had like goosebumps all over the back of my neck. I was petrified. And I spent the rest of my childhood turning off the radio if it said anything about climate change. I didn't know how to talk to my parents about it. I just lived in fear of it. And then when I was in my early 20s in culinary school, or mid 20s, I still was the same way, where I would have to turn it off because of anxiety. And I went, The Inconvenient Truth was coming out when I was in New York, and it was plastered all over the city. And I'm like, okay, Molly, you're a grown woman. You need to go see this movie and get educated on something that you're terrified by. And when I went, it was very clear to me that it's a problem, however you want to, whether it's natural evolution or whether it's, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. It's a problem. It's going to affect people. And so, Molly, what are you going to do about it? And so it was like, I started to connect that like where your fears live, inside of that is where your purpose lives. And that led me to be like, okay, I'm going to, make choices in my life that support where I would like the world to go. So from a need space, which is often just the initial start for me of like, I want this. And then from like a more maybe spiritual space of like what my fundamental morals and values and where they live, that really guided how then I made choices in life. Because I want, at a very fundamental level, as simple as it is, I just really want the earth to thrive, and I want to be in relationship with it. And the closer that I become in relationship with it, the more I'm able to navigate things like fear and anxiety and stress. It's where wholeness lives for me, and I think maybe for a lot of people as we open up into it.
Yeah. And I think that, I've heard you say on previous podcasts about this idea of, and I'm curious because you have this big idea. You want everybody around the world to be able to eat non GMO popcorn with real butter. And then, but I also have heard you say now you understand that it's like your duty is sort of this smaller kind of like locality of a farm, that maybe there needs to be this patchwork around the world of these farms. And is that something that you've had to sort of adjust to, that idea now? And I think that kind of harkens back to the fact that we live in this area
Yeah.
where you're an important part of that system here. And um, do we all have to do our own part within our area in order for that to like impact the greater good?
100%. I actually think, because I can go so into a space of perspective that it can paralyze you. And so that's the working the earth. That's why it's so good for me, is because you grow, you put a seed and you watch it grow into something, because all you can really do is do what's in front of you, love what's in front of you, do what's in front of you. And that's what the whole needs. It doesn't actually need us to be worried about the whole. It needs us to be worried about ourselves, our own body, our own families, our own community. And if all of us are doing that, then the whole is fine. It's all going to fit together. So my real values are in connecting to my community, because that's what happens when you start to grow food. That was like my only focus, like food saves the world. And then you pull that and you're like, oh, well, actually it's only one piece of the pie, because like community, connection, emotional health, like all of those things are what actually build health. And those things require you to be really looped in with your community. And as a farmer, you are 100% connected to the people that you're feeding. And that is what, builds this vibrant community, because you're growing it in a way that you are caring about that family by offering them something that they want. They are supporting you back. And the more vibrant that you can build that connection, the more financial stability the farm has. And there's no I can go so big dreamer, but like the reality is, like, financial stability is also what makes you a valuable part of the community. And we have had, we brought in this year a COO to help us achieve different goals that we have, because there's people that are better than that than I am. And, we want that and embrace that, because that's what the community needs. That's what the farm needs, all those things.
Yeah, that's interesting. It brings up an interesting thing that I noticed in terms of feedback. There's this idea, it seems like a segment of the public that believes that like taking on investors to start a farm is some sort of like negative approach to doing it. Although brands and companies are constantly taking on venture capital. So why do you think that is? Why is that sort of controversial when it comes to a farm versus a consumer packaged good?
Yeah, I don't really know. I mean, I think that there is a pride that I understand in like being a multi-generational farmer and having that land that is your land, because it is a different thing when you're working with someone else's income in that way, or someone else's finances in that way. And the dynamic of that changes, and so maybe that's, a connect. I don't really know. I don't know that I have an answer to what that is, but what I do know is that pairing people that are interested in working land with people that have the financial means to be able to do it is one of the beautiful models. Because what the other ways, right? You either inherit the land, and sometimes that's problematic because you can't actually pay the inheritance tax because the property value keeps going up, or the bank is, funding your project, or a family or a private investor of some sort is doing that. And with a private investor, different than a bank is not necessarily going to understand that it takes, a decade to restore the soil to the point that we've, from the place that we've depleted it. And yet private investors may be on board with the bigger mission of what you're having to do to just get to a place that you can farm in the way that you prefer to farm, because there's a curve to that way of being.
Yeah.
So I don't know, but I think it's what we did, and
I
it
know. Well,
works.
I think don't miss your chance to snag your ticket to our first event at Neighborly in Westlake Village. Here's how. Follow at Conejo Valley Visionaries on Instagram and then send me a DM and mention Neighborly. And I'll send you the link that gets you early access to tickets before they are available to the general public. I look forward to seeing you this summer. I think it's just like it's that sort of interesting like moral question. It's weird to me because I think we, as a consumer right now, we're supporting organic end result goods, right? But we understand, I think that there's a lot of money that goes into making that happen. But
Yeah.
the farmland, to your point, like that, just even that topsoil is what is so critical to then getting that end product that we all desire. So why would that be any different in terms of the different models you can go into starting it? Is just an interesting thing that I was curious on your take on, and obviously, something I'm sure you've had to kind of hear and deal with too.
Yeah, and I'd be interested to. I need to, next time I come across it, like ask what that perspective is, because I love to do that. I love, like, whatever I'm believing in. If I'm rubbed by something that is the opposite, I'll literally like buy a book, autobiography of like a person that's from the other perspective, and read that, because it can bring you some, because they have a point of view too. Like they're yeah, like there's some reason why they don't like that, and so if we can understand it, that'd be good.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. What do you think? What have you been most proud of since opening Apricot Lane Farms and where you guys are at?
Yeah, that's a great question. The things I've loved working with the people. One thing that I didn't realize that would happen when you're working on any kind of, because I wasn't really a manager before this farm, and I came out of school and like I studied management. I'm never going to do that. And then later, and I worked for a lawyer for a year, which I'm like, I'm never going to use that. And all of those things really, were very, very important in the especially the early days of starting the farm. But I had to learn, to be a good manager, it requires a super deep dive into yourself and your understanding of your own ability to communicate and connect and things like that. I maybe had an innate connection to inspiring, but I didn't really know how to manage, which are two very different things. So, in the process of learning how to do that, I just appreciate every person that went on that road with me. And then, from as far as the farm as a whole, I get a rush of excitement every time I stand up at Allen York Lookout, the spot on the farm, and get to look down on the fruit basket. And that's just a super, just, I just love that space and the memories that it brings. But what that was like the initial inspiration of like food, I want to grow food. But what became important over time is the habitat restoration side of what we do, and starting to understand and really learn what building a local thriving ecosystem really means, and how to incorporate wildlife into that. My husband was much more natural of understanding these things, but he's taught me over time, and I've learned just through working the farm. And I really, really love and value that side of things.
It's interesting you mentioned Alan York, who is your mentor, and I loved, following that idea that you had early on was to find a consultant, to find somebody to come in and bring that in. And I think anybody who's starting a business like that, would you recommend doing that early on in the stage, to have somebody who is maybe more educated on the subject than you be a support system?
Oh my gosh, totally. The only way that we, um, have done what we've done in our own little way on the farm is through being vulnerable to be able to open and receive help. And when you can find those people that are in alignment and guiding you in those days before your instincts really solidify, it's just priceless. So Alan, we lost him a couple years into the farm, um, of cancer, and the time spent with him, I look back on it fondly all the time. We still are in contact with his son, which is, amazing. And I just met somebody the other day who looked like him, and I was like, oh gosh, it's just he still lives. He's part of the fabric of the farm for sure.
Yeah. How would you describe your role in the farm operations now? You mentioned you just brought on the COO. What is your involvement on a day to day?
Yeah, it's really changed. We're in a space where we're more focused on less managing and more focused on being able to connect with the land on a more direct level. I found myself just in the office a lot the last couple of years, and it's not why you get into it. And so it's changed in that capacity, and I think it's going to reveal itself over time exactly what that ends up looking like in the future, but it's kind of new, and so we're just kind of still figuring out exactly what it will be.
Yeah. And I feel like I hear that from people in like, especially as entrepreneurs, once they get to a certain level, then they're not doing the thing that they actually wanted to do when they started, which was the execution part of it, which you mentioned at the beginning is like you wanted to be the doer person, and to kind of get pulled out of that, I can imagine is a little bit, challenging.
Yeah, it's we got into this in some ways in like a homestead life, homestead mindset, and this has become just such a big beautiful project that has like a life of its own at this point, and it's respecting that and learning what it needs. It's like a teenager. I often just connect with the land and will sit, put my hands on the dirt and just kind of receive whatever it's telling me, and it will tell me that it's a teenager, like it needs me to back up a little bit and let it have its space, and it's all right, it doesn't need my helicoptering anymore.
Great. Oh my gosh, to be so connected. That's incredible.
Oh.
Speaking of, you had mentioned that you wanted to do a different way of schooling for your child. And I think it's my understanding you have a homeschool kind of program that you've created. How can people in the Conejo Valley or around the LA area get involved with the farm? What are the opportunities that you guys offer?
Yeah, thank you so much for asking. So first off, we have, I'll tell you about the farm school too, but we have really amazing tours that we've spent years to develop that are on Saturdays and Sundays. We have a morning and after 9 and 1 on Saturdays and Sundays. You can take a tour, and our farm stand is open. And we actually have a coupon code for our local patrons called Local Love. So you can use that. I think it gets you 20% off, something like that. I don't want to misspeak, but I don't want to
Yeah, and
miss
we
the
can
time
put
to
that in
look,
the
but it's
show
somewhere in
notes.
that realm.
Yes.
And so come on out and see us. It means so much when the local community comes out. It's really, really great. And so you'll get to, tour. It's a walking tour, but there is a cart if you have someone that like can't do the whole walking, because you kind of walk up hills and things. And our tour guides are just phenomenal. They have been with us for a long time and really, learned side by side with us. And so they share, the ins and outs of everything that on the farm, and you get a little piece of all the different, like some animals, some orchards, some garden. And then at the end, our farm stand is open all day Saturday, all day Sunday. So you can go in there and get both a lot of our produce, and we work with another amazing local farm, McGrath, and there's some items from them in there to get a T-shirt and fun stuff like that. And we also now have some amazing offerings almost every Saturday and Sunday, often on Sunday too. Things like yoga in the avocado orchard or sound baths. And sometimes they're free and donation based, and sometimes they're a nominal fee. They've done wreath workshops and things like that. We also do have wonderful event offerings. Like this past weekend, we had a compost workshop,
Yes, I saw
which
that.
is incredibly deep dive into composting. But both what we do, we share that, but then also give tips and tricks for doing it at home. So that's a great way to like really deeply understand the soil. And then you can always supporting us at farmers markets. We're in the Thousand Oaks Thursday farmers market, which is local. We're also in Santa Monica Wednesday, but that's a little further down there. So that's a great way. We're often in different retailers, like Erewhon is one that you can find our goods in. That's a great place. But then the farm school, this I definitely want to tell you guys about. This was built, like I said, a bit of a need of how do I school Bodhi differently, but it has become such a heart space for me where I just love this program. It's schooling like 12 kids in total connection with nature. There's two amazing teachers up there with them. So it's a really low ratio, and it's a home-based homeschool program. So they're all homeschool kids that just come together and spend time with these two teachers. They get skill practice in the morning, things like math and reading and writing and things like that. But then in the afternoon, it's all project-based learning where they're out on the farm at least 2 days a week, doing different various things, learning all sorts of stuff from our experts that naturally work on the farm. And it's just wonderful to see what happens to children whenever they get to learn in natural connection with the natural world. It's where curiosity is, it's where connection is. Their love for learning is just intact. So my son is a voracious reader, as all of the homeschool kids that come out the other side of this. And it's a 4-day program, 8:30 to 2:30. So Fridays, the families can curate what else they want their child to learn, or just set a play date, or do whatever they want to do. And we are still enrolling. We only have a very few slots, and we just have a couple weeks until we're closing enrollment. So if you have any interest, please do go to our website. You can find out more and reach out to us.
Sounds like an incredible opportunity, and what a interesting way to learn. I don't know if they're practical skills, but in a way that people are not naturally learning now, and really a connection that's like goes deeper than what they're doing in
Totally. Oh, and I
education.
do have to tell you, next year, because the leadership team, they're just pulling a focus into different areas of education. It is the last year of farm school. So if people are interested, they should go ahead and check that out, because a lot of families are like, oh, I want to do that with my kid, but they kind of push it off to other years. And in future years, there will not be farm school exactly as we know it, though there will be many different educational programs. They have field trips come out and things like that all the time. So it's not the end of education, but it will be the end of farm school as we know it. So come be with us next year if you're interested.
Okay, sounds great. Now, I know you are also, in addition to a farmer and running this incredible farm, you're a cookbook author. You've had 2 cookbooks. Do you imagine writing a third at some point?
Um, yes. I can't help myself that when I'm in the kitchen, I'm always kind of like I like the process of like creating and getting it on paper and being able to like have it preserved there. And so I wrote a book called Back to Butter. I wrote it before the farm, but then we kind of finished it up in the first couple of years of the farm. And then I wrote, and that's out of print now, but you can still get some on Amazon. But then I wrote the Apricot Lane Farms cookbook, and that I'm super proud of. We had a culinary team here for a decade, and I got to like experiment with this food in all sorts of different ways and learn so much about traditional techniques. So that's out there right now. You can get it at the farm stand on the weekends. There's signed copies there, and I'll often come after the tours and just do some Q&A and mill around so I can personalize those. And then I really have in my mind that I would like to do like a family cookbook. So I'm sort of starting to collect recipes for that. The Apricot Lane Farms cookbook is a bit refined, and this next book I want to be just like family friendly recipes for the everyday.
Well, we look forward to seeing that come out into the world. And yes, I've been to the farm stand before, and it's such a beautiful space. And
Oh,
it's funny because when I first moved out here about 4 years ago, my dad was the one who had seen the documentary. He lives in Arizona and was so pleased that we were moving here and wanted to do a farm tour. It was sold out when they were visiting.
oh.
But it's so interesting that I know that there's a big global audience for the farm too. And it sounds like you've not only inspired people to check it out when they're visiting and actually kind of coming here in a tourism way, but also maybe trying their own version of a farm wherever they are that takes some of these practices into place. That must feel pretty incredible.
There's nothing I love more than when people come and they're like, oh, we learned about what you guys are doing, and it inspired me to take on my aunt's property. And so I've got 5 acres and I'm working. And we literally hear that every single Saturday and Sunday. And it's just to think that all those little farms are, across the world building their local communities. Because, this is Moorpark. This is everything we grow here. It's how vibrant we are as a community, because food is such a piece of connection. And I really believe that Moorpark can be like just a foodie haven. We have we're an agricultural community. We have cool people already doing cool things. Apricot Lane Farms is up here. Like, let's do it. Let's keep building it and just make it great.
I'm in support of it 100%. I mean, there's even a train that goes through
There's
Moorpark. So how cool is that?
It goes right to High Street. Then they can come up, and we got to get vendors down there that I want, like the greatest sourdough bread company and the greatest, whatever, just different coffee place and things like that. And Vince is going to do it. I know it. He's amazing. So,
well, speaking of that, what is your vision for Apricot Lane Farms?
I really think that there's a lot of energy behind a product that we have just on the more farming side of it, a product that is our avocado oil that is really, really beautiful. We press with 100%. So many avocado oils that you'll get out there in the market, they are blended oils. So it'll be a bit of avocado oil and some other oils in there. And ours is 100% avocados from the farm. It's then pressed whenever it's peak ripeness at a mom and pop pressing operation that's just south of where we are. And it is a different experience. If you've had avocado oil and just like, I don't really like it, just wait until you try like a real avocado oil and the difference of what that can be. And so the team here is really kind of focused on getting the trees in to be able to maximize that, and maybe even doing specialty like reed avocado oil at some point and things like that. So I think there's a lot of space for us to keep growing that, which is really neat. And then, our event extension, being able to educate and teach people. I know John and I personally are incredibly inspired by the education part of what this has to offer. And John has finished a series that is just a phenomenal work. It's a 12-episode series. And so keep in touch in the space. You can go to either Apricot Lane Farms Instagram or Biggest Little Farm Instagram. And both of those will, let you know whenever this is going to come out. But we are really interested in a curriculum that we're developing with that's done with Rodale Institute, if you've heard of that. They're wonderful in the organic farming community, and American Farmland Trust. And they both came behind it to enable this curriculum that's going to be for K through 12. And our teachers at the farm school are actually working on it. So it's going to be very authentically tied to the things that we do here at the farm. And so that's going to go out because we are amazed by how many teachers already are teaching with this film in their classroom without us having any support to them. So we want to come under that and really encourage and enable these teachers. And then we also have developed a pod curriculum. My dog is barking outside. Based on the biodynamic principles. That's what our micro school follows. They teach in rhythm with these biodynamic principles. And so that can be a micro school curriculum at some point. And John and I would like to keep furthering that work and that mission. So I have a feeling when you ask what the future is, that it has a big piece to do with both the education and the storytelling side of what we do. Because my husband, the storytelling is all him. He's got the gift there. And stop it. My dog is barking.
So there would not be an interview with you without a dog present. I mean, Todd reminds me so much of my dog, and what a sweet, all of the animals, I have to say, talk about storytelling.
Yes.
I did not expect when I first watched the film to be a real story about that emotional connection to all of the animals. And it's just such an incredible way to sort of show and to tell how everything is connected. And I thought that even just the snails, you're like, why are there so many snails? And it's like being able to do that. So yes, I feel like without a dog barking, that makes a lot of sense. It's a great way to sort of tie it all into a bow. I have a couple last quick fire questions. Yes. So the first one is, For those of us who might have a porch garden, our own backyard here in this Conejo Valley, Moorpark area, what is one tip you would give? I mean, when I saw the picture of like the beginnings of that soil, Apricot, I mean, that's what my yard looks like. What can I do? Is there one thing that I should start tomorrow to help better my soil situation?
Totally. So if you're doing it in pots, then that's a little different. And often you'll just start with the potting soil to get that going. But if you're in the ground, I always tell people just get some water on it so it softens it. Otherwise, you won't be able to even get in there at all. Then, once it's softened a little bit, get in there with a shovel and dig it up and turn it over. Then, add a bit of compost and grow something. Like, ideally, you're growing like a cover crop at the beginning because it's getting that roots into that soil that's going to start to build the organic matter and get it to a place that it's like a more friendly environment for plants to grow. But that's just the way that soil heals is by growing things in it. It's going to take care of it in that way. And then if you really want to go crazy, you can like get a soil test and see what's in there and add some amendments and all that. But it's really as simple as just like get the water, get stuff growing and start there. And then the only way you learn, it's such a hands-on thing. So the only way that you really learn is by doing.
Okay.
You try it out, trial and error.
What is your favorite summer crop that's available on the farm?
Ooh, so right now we have berries coming in, which are amazing, and mulberries specifically that are really fun, super perishable. So we only sell those at the farm stand. Um, as the summer goes along, the tropic snow peaches, which are actually, if they aren't in now, they're going to be in just like a minute. Those are my very favorite peach of the summer. They're a white peach and they have like a tropical kind of undertone flavor to them, which is phenomenal. And then as you keep going through the summer with us, you're going to get into plums. There's a bunch of amazing plums. Our apricots will start coming out. And then in the fall, persimmon is like the one thing I look forward to all year long. That's like super favorite crop.
Yes, I love that. I know because the stone fruit was a big part of that diversification, right, in the farm to begin
Yeah.
with. So yeah,
Yeah, and that's Apricot Lane Farms because apricots were the dominant crop grown in this region in dry farming ways way back when. And so a combination of both the fact that we had apricots lining the entranceway, but also that kind of throwback to what was the name Apricot Lane Farms.
amazing. What's your favorite thing to do in Moore Park or the surrounding areas?
Well, lately we have been frequent patrons of the new hearth that's right down there at Enegren because we love the Enegrens. We've been buddies with forever. And, now Chris is the mayor of our town, which is so fantastic. I don't know how he pulled that off. I'm just kidding. I'm teasing totally. He's like one of the most prominent and amazing active members of the community. But we like to go down there and just like swim in there, vibe for a bit and have some good pizza, and we'll bring games down and play, with friends. We went down with our good buddies 2 weeks ago and had a Friday night down there. And so that's probably my number one thing at the moment, but it definitely changes. And there's actually another local place that I think is great. Is there was a Illuminate spa she does like the most amazing kind of waxes and things like that on Moorpark, and she's opening up a new place called Illuminate that's over it's right there on New Los Angeles, but you could look it up and it's going to be really good. She's going to have like massages and things like that there too. But she's an entrepreneur and she does really good stuff. So that would be like a space to watch too.
Okay, I'll have to look into her. And yes, I love what Enegren's doing. I'm always looking for places that are kid friendly,
Yeah.
adult friendly.
Yes.
And I feel like they do such a good job with that alley over there. Like kids can run around. I love it when there's somebody strumming on a guitar, kids are dancing, you're able to have beer and some pizza. Yeah, it's a really great setup.
I love that you say that about all ages because that's when we do festivals up here at the farm, which we have done like music festivals and different things. That is the highlight for me is watching like all ages. You have, friends that are in chairs just kind of watching, and then you have people doing Congo lines with the kids and things like that. And that's just, I think if you can hit the sweet spot where you're hitting all ages, it's really, things are humming.
I mean, we live in the suburbs for some reasons are different than others, but in particular, a lot of us moved out here because we want that lifestyle for our children. So yes, having places that are accessible for all ages is important.
That's so good.
Okay, my last question for you is, what is one piece of advice you would offer to a first-time entrepreneur?
First-time entrepreneur. Someone told me long ago, they said, because I was feeling this like real loss of, what do I do? I just felt like I was in the sea of like, who knows? And she said, Molly, what you focus on expands. And I think that having that understanding of like, even a little bit of an inkling of something that you're interested in, if you kind of start to focus and then put your attention in that direction, the path starts to unfold itself. And that every entrepreneur sits in that real blank page space. And it's just like little movements start to create that momentum that becomes the flywheel.
I love that. I just read a quote from Rumi that was similar to that. Like clarity doesn't like come before you take that first step. Something along those lines.
Yes.
And I think that really resonates.
Yeah, I think so.
Molly, thank you so much for your time today and for everything that you guys are doing. What an incredible story. Thank you for sharing with us and thank you for being such an important part of this community.
Oh, thank you, Christina. And thanks for what you're doing because you're highlighting it all. And so it's really appreciated. And it was fun to spend time together.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to Conejo Valley Visionaries. If you like today's episode, make sure to subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen. And don't forget to rate and review us. That's the best way to support the podcast. To enter our giveaways, learn about local events, and to find out more about each guest, follow at Conejo Valley Visionaries on Instagram. If you want to share your visionary story on the podcast, send us an email. We are always open to guest nominations. Email ConejoValleyVisionaries@gmail.com. This episode was produced by Christina Denstead and Justin K. Sloan. Conejo Valley Visionaries is edited by Justin K. Sloan and J. Sloan Productions. Don't miss your chance to snag your ticket to our first event at Neighborly in Westlake Village. Here's how. Follow at Conejo Valley Visionaries on Instagram and then send me a DM and mention Neighborly. And I'll send you the link that gets you early access to tickets before they are available to the general public. I look forward to seeing you this summer.